Hello everyone, it's Joe here from OmniPoke, the channel that brings you guys everything Pokemon, and today we're looking at the complete set of Fates Collide, the new set that's going to be released on the 4th of May. So this is probably going to be a long video, and for those of you cringing at probably the length of it already, I normally do ramble on for normally around an hour or more. We will be doing a top 10 list as well, so if you just want to see the cream of the crop, the best of the best, wait for that video, I guess. But stay tuned if you want to see a more broad scope. We're not going over every single card, but the majority of cards worth discussing I will be chatting about. So before we head on into it, there are some cards that we have the scans in English, like you can see the Ordino and the Carbink, but the majority of the cards are still only in Japanese, so I've had to do translations and improvise and stuff like that. So card names and stuff may be different, like attack names, but this is basically what the set is. We got the full set list revealed, so we know that this is for sure what we're getting in English. So should be fun. Let's start off, as always, with the grass types. So here is Shuckle, an interesting basic Pokemon. It has 2 attacks, as you can see. For a colourless energy, Hide Berries. Allows you to draw 2 cards, then put 1 card from the top from your hand onto the bottom of your deck. So instantly you think there's synergy with the fossil cards. Obviously the fossil cards allow you to look at the bottom 7 of your deck and get any restored Pokemon and put them onto your bench. So Shuckle may have synergy with the sort of fossil archetype. I do think he's kind of a slow card though. It's been a while since we've had Pokemon just sit in the active position to do these sorts of card effects. So I don't think Shuckle's too strong. Potentially it'll make it into the Archie build of fossils, and you just have one of these Shuckle because oftentimes you just need some sort of basic Pokemon. Oftentimes Mew will fill the role of that, where you just stick Mew in the active position until you hit your Archies, and then Archies can get you Omastar. Omastar gets you into your Aerodactyl. So Shuckle may not be bad as a one-of in that deck because Mew can copy it for free sometimes because his attack cost is colourless. His second attack is Wrap, which is 30, Coin Flip for Paralysis. That's actually okay. Again, if it's in this as a one-of, you can copy it for a single energy with D-Valley to stall for some turns while you're waiting for this Archie combo. So Shuckle might sneak into decks as a sneaky one-of, but I don't think it's very viable, to be honest, as its own sort of lead Pokemon. And the fossil archetype itself isn't that viable, so Shuckle's really fringe, I say. On to another kind of fringe, funky concept, the Wormadams and the Mothim. So here is Mothim on the far left. It has the ability Wormathought. As often as you like during your turn, you may move 1 damage counter from one of your Wormadam to another one of your Pokemon. So it's reminiscent of the XY Reuniclus, which allows you to move counters around all your stuff. Here we can just move counters off of Wormadams, but then we can put them anywhere else. Its attack is not really worth noting. 3 colourless for 60 is not great. The free retreat is handy though, and it's also levelable, searchable, which is kind of cool. The grass type Wormadam is pretty useless. I didn't even bother translating it. I don't think it's a very good card. But there's the other 2 Wormadams, the fighting and the metal one, which kind of make a cute combo. So the fighting type Wormadam, you can see in the middle of the screen, has a first attack for a fighting, which is just 30. Not very interesting, but for 3 colourless energy, you get to do Twin Bomber, which is 60. And if you have a Mothim on the bench, you do 120. So that's not terrible numbers. It's decent pressure that you can put on. Fighting type we know is great because we have stuff like Strong Energy, other damage increases like Regirock even, which I'll talk about later. So this can actually get quite big if you really want it to. But the biggest reason why it's actually notable is because you can put Focus Sash on this card. And if you're using this with Mothim, you can actually allow yourself to lose the Focus Sash, go down to 10 HP, use the Mothim to basically instantly heal your Wormadam, and put a Focus Sash back on. So you can sometimes chain this one Wormadam as long as your opponent doesn't get rid of Focus Sash. So it's kind of a neat concept. It does combo with the Metal type Wormadam for a single metal energy. Revenge attack does 20 times the number of damage counters on this Pokemon. So Wormadam can have up to 9 counters on it, so that is 120 damage. So the idea is, 180. So you tank with this Wormadam, Motham heals this one, puts 9 counters onto this Wormadam, and then hits for 180. So definitely a cute combo. Because these are colourless energy, you can just play DCEs and metals as well. So there's something here, but I think it's just too niche. People can break the sash, people can Hex Maniac through you. So many reasons why this probably won't work, just too clunky. These cards aren't really searchable enough. Maybe if they had 3 retreat, they could be heavy ball searchable. Maybe if they were all 90 HP, you could search them all out with level balls, but that doesn't quite make good numbers with revenge attacks. So it's just a near miss kind of fun archetype, which I don't think is ever going to see too much play. Also notably, which could be slightly more, again, it's still wombo combo and kind of fun, but instead of playing both Wormadam, you just play Rotom, which allows you, which I'll talk about later, but it's the same sort of strategy where we focus sash, manipulate the damage with the Motham so that Rotom can do good numbers. But again, it's the same thing I was saying earlier, just too much trying to get set up at once. You just won't have the time to do it against most decks, and it is fairly easy to get around focus sash. Next up we have Servine. Servine has a fantastic ability called Snakebind. You may use this once you evolve into Servine, and you get to flip a coin. If heads, the opponent's active Pokemon is now paralyzed. Paralysis is one of the strongest status conditions to try and inflict on opponents, because they really can't do anything other than use Super Scoop Up, Switch, AZ, Cassius, these sorts of cards, which on its own can be frustrating. If the thing in the active position is their main attacker, sometimes they have to lose energy or they have to switch out of their main attacker. So using Servine could be really cool in conjunction with something like Seismitoad, where we're just hitting Quaking Punch, so then your opponent can't use any of these cards. They can't use switches or Super Scoop Ups. Then the outs simply become AZ or Cassius, or I guess Zoroark with a Floatstone is also an out. But basically Snakebind is a really cool ability, flipping for paralysis with all of these spam cards. De-Evolution Spray is reprinted in this set. We have Super Scoop Up, we have Forest of Giant Plants, which means we can use Servine from as early as the first turn. So spamming Snakebind might be an option for some of these stally decks, and Toad is, the king of a stally deck. So he could be seen as a nice little bench tech for Seismitoad, because there's a lot of awkward cards in this set that challenge Seismitoad and how viable Toad will be in the future. So it may have to look into new avenues of how to play the deck, rather than just have hammer spam. Maybe now we're going for paralysis spam, so Servine could feature in the new Toad decks. Also, because of Servine's strength, I think Serperior has a lot of potential. You can see here, one of the main reasons I actually consider Serperior at all is because of how good Servine is. However, it has 2 decent attacks. It's 140 HP grass type. Obviously with Forest we get to go instantly into him as long as we can search these cards out. And both his attacks are for a single energy. Coil is for a colourless energy. We get to do 40 damage, and during next turn the damage from this Pokemon's attacks do 60 more. So if we're not hit with a Lysander, or if the Serperior isn't knocked out, it would mean that the next turn Coil does 100, or our second attack Slashdown does 140. And with the initial 40 from the original Coil, that's 180. So we can actually 2-hit KO EX Pokemon, which is pretty strong, as long as we're not gusted out of the way. So Coil is a decent attack. Slashdown is also decent. For just a grass, we get to do 80. Remember, this could be on the first turn, so it's a lot of pressure turn 1. It's similar to like Butterfree Milk Tank back in the day, where you put early pressure on. So just a base of 80 for a single energy is decent. You can't use Slashdown during the next turn, so either you have to switch to Coil, or you have to use something like Super Scoop Up, pick up your Serperior, play it all back down with Forest, and then you get the addition of like Snakebind as well. So there's a lot of nice combos. I've profiled this already on the channel, so check out how I try to build this deck. Just simply because of the typing of Serperior, you can see just being a grass type means you're probably going to have good matchups against Toad, Greninja, and Zygarde. Toad and Greninja are currently decent decks, and Zygarde is looking to be a big contender in the future. So in terms of having great typing, Serperior ticks a lot of boxes, and with this nice backup paralysis for when we're trying to 2-shot things, keep our Serperiors healthy, there's a lot of things that I like about this Serperior, and although its damage output isn't the strongest, there's some cheeky plays this deck can make for sure, and I think it's one to look out for. Right, onto the fire types, and we have Delphox and the first break evolution of the set that we'll look at, Delphox Break. So the regular Delphox has 140 HP, which is pretty fair for a stage 2. It has 2 attacks. The first is Flickering Flame, which does 40 damage, and your opponent's active is now asleep. I guess it's kind of meh, can sometimes get your opponent sleeping so that they can't really do much. It can help you out in niche situations, but it's really the second attack, Psycho Storm, which is a really powerful attack. One of the most powerful attacks I think I've ever seen on a card. It's for 3 colorless energy, and you do 20 times the number of energy attached to all Pokemon. So this reminds me of Leafeon. This is a previous favorite card of mine, which does 20 times the number of energy attached to only your opponent's Pokemon. And I remember this card getting pretty huge in certain matchups against stuff like Keldeo Stoice. So having Psycho Storm do this 20 damage, it's like an X-Ball, but it's for the entire board. Very, very strong. I can see this easily reaching one-hit KOs all over the place, especially in a fire deck where we have things like Blacksmith to help us accelerate. Team Magma's Camerupt can accelerate fire onto himself just to give us an additional damage of like plus 20 for every Camerupt we have in play. So Delphox has a lot of potential. We of course have the other stage 2 Delphox from X and Y, which has Mystical Fire, which allows us to draw up to 6 in the hand for a bit of added consistency. But I still think just being a stage 2 deck is just too slow in a format like this. I feel like this Delphox break, or this Delphox deck overall, will never be able to beat a deck like Night March or most trainer locking decks, because you're a stage 2. You're simply slower than Night March, and you're going to struggle to set up against Trainer Lock or other disruption-based decks. So, although this attack is huge, we're not really in a format where just big attacks win you games. So that's a bit of a shame. In that light, let's look at the Delphox Break. This is, we have to remember, essentially a stage 3 card, and there's been very few stage 3 cards that have actually really worked for us. It's only been stuff like Greninja Break, because his ability is absolutely bonkers, and we have Frogadier to help us get multiple Greninjas out a little bit easier. So 180 HP is a nice step up. It's essentially EX HP for a single prize. The ability is Flare Witch, and once during your turn you may search your deck for a fire energy and attach it to one of your Pokemon. It's a good ability, that's no doubt, but it's just so slow. It's like what I was saying, you're never going to beat Night March with an ability like this. You're never going to get back in the prize race after being so slow. It does have synergy with both of the Delphox, so it's clearly a good card. It's just not good enough for an effective stage 3 Pokemon. So unfortunately, Delphox is one of those cards that just stays in the binder due to its speed. On to Lord Helix himself, onto the water types. So let's look at the original Omastar. He has a pretty interesting ability. The ability is Restoration Beam. Once during a turn, before you attack, you may search your deck for a restored Pokemon and put it onto your bench. Shuffle your deck afterwards. This is clearly going to be the way that we can get fossils into play. I think, we've tried fossil decks in the past. At the moment, Fossil Researcher isn't quite cutting it. Just using the actual fossils themselves, like Old Amber and Helix Fossil, it's super slow. But thankfully, Omastar is a water type, so we can actually try and build an Archie's engine to get Omastar in play on the first turn, and then straight away we can use his ability to get an Aerodactyl, most likely, onto our bench and start attacking from the very first turn. So I think the Omastar deck, if you can get Archie consistent enough, it could be a deck, maybe. I think it's fringe, but it's definitely an interesting ability and really does help out fossils overall, because they really have been given a bad deal, because really it's so hard to get fossils into play and you have to really build your deck around it. So at least this way we build our deck around Archie and have a lot of speedy cards rather than loads of slow situational cards like the fossils. The attack for a water colorless just does a base of 60, but really who cares about that? He's going to sit on the bench just to try and use Restoration Beam for as many turns as possible to set up your fossil type Pokemon. And then hopefully you can Break Evolve, because Omastar Break, my goodness, this ability is very strong. It's called Dangerous Tentacles, and once during your turn, you may choose one of your opponent's benched Pokemon EX and switch it with his or her active Pokemon. Very, very strong card. Clearly, a lot of the time you're going to target Shaman EXs for easy prizes. This combos really nicely with the Aerodactyl, which I'll get onto later. So it's very similar to the Bright Look that we've seen in the past in Luxray and Ninetales, but you can do it once per turn as long as it's an EX Pokemon. So slightly more situational, but you can do it every turn. Very, very strong. I feel like the way you're going to build a fossil deck is you're going to have the Archie build with just a few Aerodactyls and some Mew, and then you're going to have one or two of these Break Evolutions so that we can just simply try and prize race people and use Aerodactyl to spam Shaman KOs, probably with Target Whistle as well. So I think it's going to be an interesting one. It's going to be one that I profile soon as well. This ability is just bonkers for killing Shamans. It's a very, Shaman heavy meta right now, so being able to target these cards and take full advantage is going to be really fantastic. So if only this wasn't a fossil type, I think it would clearly see play everywhere. Thankfully, we can Archie into this one and hopefully cheat our way into the Omastar so that we never have to play these silly fossil cards. On to Glaceon EX, and this is a 170 HP Water type EX Pokemon with two pretty interesting attacks. The first one is for a Water and Colorless Energy. It's called Second Bite. We do a base of 20 damage and 10 more for each damage counter on your opponent's active Pokemon. So this is pretty much the identical attack of Wobbuffet, but we do a base of 10 more. So we know Wobbuffet's attack is really good, but the main reason we use Wobbuffet in the first place is because of his Bide Barricade ability. So that's not the main reason that we would want to play Glaceon. It's actually his second attack, Crystal Ray, which is for a Water and 2 colorless. We do a base of 70, which is pretty weak, but during your opponent's next turn, prevent all damage done to this Pokemon by evolved Pokemon. So it's pretty much the counterpart to the Jolteon EX that we've seen from the Generations set, where Jolteon can't be targeted by non-evolutions and Glaceon can't be damaged by evolved Pokemon. So you're trying to have the perfect lock deck, basically. If you play Lightning and Water Energy in most likely a Mega Manectric deck, you can try and be disruptive to whatever deck you're playing against. So there aren't that many strong evolution decks out there right now that Manectric can't already beat. Like, think about Greninja. Well, Greninja's damage doesn't really come from attacks too much, so they'd still beat you. Think about Trevenant. Manectric can already beat Trevenant just with a high Rough Seas count. And then stuff like Vespiquen, these are the times where you're probably going to be more favoured going into this, but already with such a high HP, this deck can beat, regular Vespiquen as long as they're not playing Vileplume. So I don't really see Glaceon being that good in the Manectric deck, but it's clearly an option people can go for to try and just wall out the opponent. And we've seen Manectric play a split with Water Energy before with Regice and Articuno and such, so I don't see why you can't fit one Glaceon in these decks. Speaking of fitting one Glaceon in the deck, let's think about Expanded for a little bit, and potentially this could be thrown into Blastoise. Again, one of these cards where the deck has sometimes struggled with Vespiquen Flareon because so many EXs, you're relying on Articuno to flip well so that you get back into those sorts of games. Well, now we can play one Glaceon and just, stop them altogether. We set up one Crystal Ray and then straight away we win against Vespiquen Flareon, basically. So that could be a very nice one-of for Archie Blastoise, so that's something to bear in mind at the very least. Next up we have Barbaracle. I think a lot of people overhyped this card, to be honest. The ability is very good. Hand block. You can use this ability if you have a Stadium in play. As long as this Pokemon is in play as well, your opponent can't attach Special Energy from his or her hand. So comparable to Chaos Wheel, but in an ability rather than an attack. You need to have a Stadium in play as well, so it's quite a large setup really. It's a Stage 1 and the Stadium. Obviously, you'll be playing Stadiums most of the time anyway for your own benefit, so it's not really all commitment just for the ability, it's just an addition. And where's this ability most crucial? Well, I think some people would try and argue Night March, but because of the new Mew card, they're going to be playing Basic Energy in addition to Specials anyway now, so you don't really counter Night March very well. You do, however, counter Toad decks quite well. Straight Toad do play Basic Energy as well, but Toadtina, they don't, so it's pretty good against Toadtina. But of course, people can Hex Maniac and then attach their energy, or they can use Delinquent to get rid of the Stadium and then put on their energy. So it's not a permanent lock. It's quite easy to get around. Hex Maniac is in the majority of decks, and if Barbaracle gets strong, so will Delinquent if it really does struggle against Barbaracle. So I really think it's too easily countered, especially because Hex is already in everything. And there just aren't many decks that just play for DCE. Clearly Night March has done in the past, but they're going to differentiate with Mew anyway, so Barbaracle isn't really the be-all and end-all card that we thought it would be when we first saw it printed. And just think, where do you really want to play this card? I have not thought of a deck where I thought, right, I need this 2/2 Barbaracle in here. I thought maybe like a 1/1 in a Vespiquen deck, because I have the space for loads of Pokemon, and if Barbaracle is not going to be handy, I can just discard him. But look at that chunky retreat cost. For something like Vespiquen, where you play very few switching cards, this is just a big Lysander target until they figure out how to deal with it. So I really think Barbaracle, the ability is insane. It's just, I don't know, it's not the right time for Barbaracle. Most decks have pretty much got away around special energy already because of how much hate for specials we already have in the format. People have had to play around Giratina this whole time, and with that sort of logic, it's going to be easy to play around Barbaracle. Next up we have Rotom. This is a pretty fun card. A lot of people have said it's a nice counter to Trev Break. I think so too. It's a 70 HP lightning type with 2 attacks. The first one for a single lightning energy is called Energy Draw. You search your deck for a basic and attach it to this Pokemon. It's kind of okay. There's not many times where we're playing it in lightning based decks, so I think it's rarely going to be used for this attack. It's the second attack called Plasmagic for 2 colorless energy. You get to move 2 damage counters from each of your Pokemon with damage counters on them to your opponent's active Pokemon. So we can manipulate this with things like Team Magma's Secret Base, and if all of our Pokemon in play with Magma's Base have 2 counters on it, we get to place 120 counters on the opponent's active Pokemon. But we can go even one step further and use Skyfield and something like Dugtrio, which has the Earthquake attack, which allows you to put, or forces you to put 10 damage counters on each of your own bench Pokemon. And if you have something like Focus Sash on Dugtrio and he can tank a hit, a total of 9 Pokemon with, Skyfield stays in play, the active Pokemon's not dead, we can actually place 180 counters on Pokemon. And on a non-EX for a DCE, that's pretty strong for sure. I do, however, think this is a bit of a convoluted approach. Dugtrio's an okay Pokemon, never been too great. So I don't see it with this sort of janky Skyfield, Ninetales, Rotom nonsense being, a top tier deck. However, this is most likely going to feature as, the Trevenant counter card if you are playing certain decks. I still don't think you play it in something like Night March. I still don't think you play it in a majority of decks, simply because if you're playing Rotom as a one-off to beat Trevenant, you have to think under item lock, most of the time you're not even going to see that Rotom, because Trevenant will beat you in a very low number of turns. So as this sort of mighty Trevenant counter, which it can be, but you just have to draw into it and also draw your energy. And even then you're not getting rid of all the damage counters. They can just switch up and use Tree Slam a couple of times and deal with this Rotom quite easily. So I don't think this Rotom's going to be that good. It does have potential though, and it might sneak into something again like a Vespiquen deck where you have the space for these weird techie cards, because then it can pay off big time to buy you turns against Trev. But overall, I don't think we're going to be building decks around this guy, even though I'm getting creative and giving you something to do when you're bored. So let's move on to Alakazam EX and Mega Alakazam EX, the Psychic King himself. It's been a long time since we've seen Alakazam, and he's not disappointed, to be honest. The regular Alakazam has 160 HP for a Psychic type, which is pretty bad, which is a shame. But his ability really does make up for this. Kinesis, when you Mega Evolve... when you play Mega Alakazam from your hand to evolve this Pokemon, you place 2 counters on your opponent's active and 3 to one of their benched Pokemon. Very strong. That's 5 damage counters compared to something like Golbat, which in one evolution can only place 2 counters. Even Crobat only places 3 counters after one evolution, and that's a turn later than this has potential to do. So 5 total counters in one evolution is absolutely bonkers as an ability. It's almost on par with Greninja Break, even though it's just a basic into essentially a Stage 1 Pokemon, as long as you have Spirit Links. So a fast-track version of Greninja, almost, and, you know, more damage than bats for the same speed. This bodes really well. Very, very powerful ability. He also has a decent attack to boot. Suppression for a Psychic and Colorless. Bear in mind, D-Valley is an option for this deck. We get to place 3 counters on each of your opponent's Pokemon that has any energy attached. The way the game's going right now, most decks are only attaching to one thing at a time, unless it's something like a Yveltal deck, or something that really does love to flood the field of energy. So suppression's normally not that powerful, but it can be nice just to get those counters in play if you're being hit with something like Hex Maniac, so your Kinesis doesn't work. But then we move on to the Mega Alakazam. This is where we really see the Wombo combo pay off. So we've done these Kinesis snipes, and then we can use his attack Zen Force for, again, that Psychic Colorless cost. So either 1 energy plus D-Valley, or we can have Mega Turbo to accelerate this guy. That's my preferred method. I've done a deck analysis of this, so you can check out this deck as well on the channel. We do a base of 10 damage, but 30 more damage for the number of counters on your opponent's active Pokemon. So looking at this, we need to have 4 counters to deal with a regular, or the majority of EXs, 5 counters to clear up every EX and some non-EXs. Every EX and most Megas, and then this deals with pretty much everything with 6 counters. So in total, we put 5 counters on for just 1 Mega Evolution, and if we use something like Absol, it only takes 1 Mega Evolution to deal with the majority of EXs, even the majority of Megas. So very, very strong, very fast. You can be killing EXs from turn 2, which is very strong. And at the same time, you have the flexibility with this ability here, Kinesis, to deal with the lower HP things, deal with the Combees, deal with the Night Marchers a little bit nicer, as long as you have your abilities online, of course. And because it's a Mega deck, we can spam Hooper, spam Shaman, spam Super Scoop Up. It's going to be really nice. I think this is a very nice contender for the format, and honestly, I think it's a front runner. It's a very, very good deck from my early testing. I'm a big fan of Alakazam, and some people are skeptical. They think, oh, this insta loses to Night March, but because of the Kinesis ability, as long as you're not being hexed, this can do crazy comebacks versus Night March. If you get enough Mega Evolutions in a single turn, enough Absol drops, we can deal with all the Night Marchers at once and put the opponent in an awkward spot. So Mega Alakazam has a lot of tricks, and it can be good against the high HP stuff and the low HP stuff. So overall, I think it has very few straight out bad matchups, which is pretty good for Alakazam. I think this is going to be a really nice contender in the future. Next up, we have a couple more interesting Psychic types. It's the return of the Mill approach, Coughing and Wheezing. First of all, let's mention Coughing. He has a handy little attack for a Psychic energy called Divide. We get to search our deck for 2 Coughing and put them onto the bench. Really nice consistency booster for a deck like this, where we're trying to set up multiple stage 1s, so it's a nice handy thing to be aware of. Wheezing has 2 attacks. The first one is really the one that I want to look at, Balloon Bomb, for 2 colourless energy, so either that's just the DCE, or we play Psychic Energy to sort of complement the Coughing, and we also play D-Valley. We get to flip 2 coins. For each heads, we discard the top 2 cards of the opponent's deck. So with something like Trick Coin, we can do up to 4 cards, which is, kind of strong. It's on par with Durant's that we've seen in the past. He's slightly more searchable. We have, heavy ball search, slightly more HP, quite easy to do with just a single energy in D-Valley or just double colourless. So only time will tell really if Mill can be an appropriate deck. It's been a while since the format's been slow enough for a Mill approach, especially when we need to fit a full 4 count of each of the stage 1s and probably other cards to complement it. I don't think the deck really has space to work, but I could be proved wrong, and Wheezing could be sneaking wins here or there just by milling out the opponent with some of these trolley cards like Trick Shovel and Ninjask. Could be a lot of fun. Definitely one I want to try out. Oh boy, it's time for Mew. Quite possibly the best card in the set. Almost definitely the best card in the set. I think it easily makes my top 3. Mew is a phenomenal card. It's a basic psychic type that has free retreat for 50 HP. So already it's in a very exclusive club of basic free retreaters, which makes it already on par with things like Hawlucha before we even look at the ability or the attack. But this is a phenomenal ability. It's called Beginning Memories. This Pokemon can use the attacks of each of your basic Pokemon in play as long as you have the necessary energy to attack. So why on earth would we want to use this low HP Pokemon instead of just, a big EX Pokemon? Well, quite clearly, being a Psychic type, we can abuse D-Valley, so we can use some of these more powerful attacks for less energy, which is pretty awesome. He also has the attack himself for a colorless energy called Encounter. We get to search the deck for a Pokemon, reveal it, and put it into the hand. This can help us not lose to dead draw. We can just go grab a Shaman or grab another bench Pokemon, another Mew even, just to help us tick over really. So it's a nice early game option, especially if you haven't got the right combo pieces. So this could be a nice option for us. So where are we going to use Mew? Well, quite clearly it's going to be a 1 or 2 of in Night March, so that we don't have to just play 4 DCE. The way Night March can easily lose games is if you prize DCE or you can't get Puzzle at the right times and you just run out of energy. A lot of decks like Greninja are trying to just spam Jirachi promo. Oh, there it is right there. So that you don't have enough energy to win the game. Well, with Mew, you're already playing D-Valley, so you can just play Mew and some basic energy to copy Night March, and effectively you have more Night Marches, you keep your things safer on the bench, so this is clearly going to be a 1 or 2 of in Night March in my opinion. It also gives the deck much needed free retreaters, so all around great for Night March. It's also an interesting card for mill decks. The Durant mill you can use Scrape Down for a single grass energy, although you need to put damage on yourself, so it's most likely going to be a rainbow. So there'll be a profile of that deck coming soon. It could also feature in the old version of Durant where you just copy the Devour attack and keep these Durants safe on the bench. So plenty of avenues for this Mew. There's probably going to be a Mew box deck where you have different types of attackers. You can copy Quaking Punch for a single energy. You can copy Assault Laser for a single lightning. You can copy Unseen Claw for a single grass. You can copy Stardust for free if you have D-Valley in play. So absolutely phenomenal. You could play it literally like Rainbow Energy in a combination of all of these cards put together. And bear in mind, this is just looking at Standard right now. So in Expanded, we also have Prism Energy. So we can have up to 8 effectively Rainbow Energy to work off of Mew. And just have a real boxy style deck to really counter whatever you're facing up against. So this card is absolutely bonkers. I think everyone's aware that Mew is one of the best cards in the set for sure. Very, very powerful ability. It can be shot off with Hex Maniac, so it's not the be-all and end-all, but bear in mind as well, if you're hexed, you can just free retreat out of there and move into a different attacker, so it's not that big of a deal for you. So Mew, absolutely phenomenal card. I think we'll see a lot of this guy. Some more interesting Psychic types. This is a pretty fun archetype, which I want to test out. Definitely a lot of power behind this deck, and pretty fun as well. So all of the evolution line here of Reuniclus have a kind of similar attack. So as Solosis, we do for a Psychic Colorless Mini Link 10, and if there's a Solosis on the bench, 30 more. Not too great, but then we look at Duosion. For the same attack cost, Double Link does a base of 10 once again. If there's Solosis on the bench, do 30 more. If there's Duosion on the bench, do 60 more. And these stack, bear in mind, so now we're doing, if we have Solosis and Duosion on the bench, we do 100. Again, for a Psychic Energy plus D-Valley, that's not too bad on a stage 1 Pokemon. But then we get to Big Daddy Reuniclus. I say Big Daddy, it only has 90 HP, so it's still a pretty weak stage 2 Pokemon in all honesty. Bit of a glass cannon, because Link Fusion is an absolute monster of an attack, potentially. It's a base of 10. If there's Solosis on the bench, we do that 30 more. If there's Duosion, we have that 60 more. But if there's another Reuniclus on our bench, we do an additional 90 damage. So that's pretty bonkers. A lot of damage counters, as long as you can keep streaming this Reuniclus line. This is the biggest issue for the deck. It's very similar to the round deck that we've seen in the past, where the deck, yes, it can hit high numbers, but how can you stream these attackers? Well, because we're all 90 HP or less, we can spam lots of level balls, lots of repeat balls. We're going to use D-Valley to just use Psychic Energy to attack each turn, so very cheap attacker that can hit really high numbers is very appealing to me. It's Glass Cannon-like, almost in a way that Night March is. So, pretty cool card. I think it's kind of too slow, although I like that Duosion can do 100, because that can really help it keep up with Night March as best you can. Like, you just play as a stage 1 deck against other stage 1 and other base and other low HP Pokemon decks. You're not stressed out having to go into Reuniclus against those decks, so the fact that Duosion's quite good means you can potentially keep up with these faster decks, and then against the big EX stuff, you go into Big Daddy Reuniclus and, you know, one-hit KO EX Pokemon, which is just hilarious. One-hit KOing for just a regular energy, that's a really powerful prospect. So he can have some good matchups around a lot of different decks, which is kind of cool. Bear in mind, though, that you insta-lose against Trevenant, because Trev Break can kill all of your Solosis at once. He can use Tree Slam to kill your Duosions, and of course you have weakness to it, so it also kills your Reuniclus very easily. And the deck is going to be very item focused with probably some speed cards, not necessarily skates, but like Acrobike, Trainer's Mail, all these things in high counts to try and spam your Reuniclus as quickly as possible. So Trevor will probably eat you alive, unfortunately. So Reuniclus is never going to be the best deck in the world, but it can definitely cause a few decks some problems, and it's going to be fun to see how this interacts. I think it's way better than the round deck that we had in the past, so at least that's saying something. On to the fighting types now, and we have plenty of humdingers of fighting types. Starting off with this Marowak, it has the ability Bodyguard. You and your hand are not affected by the effects of your opponent's Pokemon's attacks, and remove any existing effects on you and your hand. This is absolutely really awesome. It's the first time we've seen an ability like this before, I believe. Correct me in the comments down below if I'm wrong about this, but this is, you know, a huge troll, a huge middle finger to Seismitoad EX and Giratina EX. So as long as you develop a Marowak, Quaking Punch effectively does nothing. Chaos Wheel does nothing. You can still play your items, you can still play your tools, you can still play your special energy, you can still play your stadiums, as long as Marowak is developed. What I really like about Marowak is he's a fighting type, clearly, so we can use Karina, and Karina can be used under item lock, of course, so that we can actually just search out these Marowak pieces. So for all of these fighting decks, if you're struggling versus Toad, you can just put a 1-1 Marowak in, and straight away, you're really not that bothered. And what's really awesome is, like, oh, Toad can just Lysander you up and Quaking Punch. Well, as long as this guy doesn't die, Bodyguard still works, so you can just be like, oh hey, I'll just play a switching card because I can. So Quaking Punch isn't even that good of a lock card trying to deal with this Marowak, so it's going to take a few turns for a Toad deck to deal with this guy, so really, really phenomenal card. I don't think it's necessarily played in every deck, but for certain fighting decks that struggle v Toad, maybe stuff like Garchomp, it could really deal with, it could really enjoy like a 1-1 Marowak line. Pretty cool card. Like I say, I don't think it's as splashable as everyone's thinking. I don't see it being played in everything just for space, and because people are playing the Karina, it's easy to find in fighting decks. In regular decks, if you're being hit with Quaking Punch, it's not going to be easy to hit your Marowak unless you do it proactively, which is kind of difficult, seeing as though it's a stage 1 Pokemon, so not as splashable as everyone's saying, but a nice boost to fighting decks. On to another boost of fighting decks, we have Regirock EX. His ability is Regipower. Each of your fighting Pokemon do 10 more damage to your opponent's active Pokemon, excluding itself. So this is pretty phenomenal. It's pretty much a carbon copy of Deoxys's Power Connect, but Power Connect only worked for Plasmas. This time we're doing it for just fighting types, and there's plenty of good fighting types already out there. Think about Landorus EX for Expanded. The new Zygarde is going to be bonkers with this card. There's just the damage output. You can stack this, of course, so up to 4 Regirock on your bench can give you a plus 40 damage just from the bench. Really, really huge. Considering we already have Fighting Stadium, you know, Muscle Band, Strong Energy, even these low damage output cards like Medicham, this Yoga Kit could get insane. Think about because we can use Barrage, we essentially get like a plus 80 if we have 4 Regirocks in play. So Yoga Kick gets absolutely monstrous already, just without even considering Muscle Band or Strong Energy involved. Medicham can get insane buff with this Regirock. It's very, very cool, actually. He does have the attack Bedrock Press. It's worth noting because most decks now are going to be playing Carbink, if they're fighting decks, of course. So although this is a 3 energy cost of all fighting, we have a lot of good acceleration now. So we do 100 damage, and during next turn, any damage done to this Pokemon is reduced by 20. It might be a handy attack against stuff like Night March, where if we have something like Fighting Fury Belt on us and that reduction of 20, we can sometimes stay out of range, take multiple knockouts, and pressure a lot of things. If we're attaching double Strong Energy, again, Carbink is going to help us do that. We can pressurize Shamans and just Lysander them up, get ahead in the prize race, and really slow down a Night March deck. So I think even the attack's decent, and definitely a good ability. I'm not certain on how many Regirock to play in Zygarde. There's been times where I play 0, sometimes it's just a one-of, as like a nice little max fixer, and sometimes it's like, okay, I want 3 or 4 Regi and just go as powerful as possible. So interesting to see where people land on this card, especially because it's Karina searchable once again. It's pretty much like a searchable plus power. On to the Carbinks. So 2 very interesting, very strong Carbink here. First of all, let's look at this one. Energy Keeper. As long as this Pokemon is in play, your basic Pokemon's basic energy can't be discarded by effects of your opponent's attacks, abilities, or trainers. I've actually done this wrong. This shouldn't be Xerosic. This should be Flare Grunt. Because Xerosic gets rid of special energy, not basic. But basically, we're going to use Carbink again in these fighting decks to protect our energy from stuff like Crushing Hammer. I've done Jirachi as well. I've really not read this card. But basically, cards that would get rid of our energy. Just look at the Crushing Hammer. Ignore these cards. People aren't going to be able to do it. So Toad decks, most notably, they can't Flare Grunt and Crushing Hammer away your energy. So it's a really nice one-of. Again, it's another nail in the coffin for Seismitoad against these fighting decks. I think this wave of new fighting decks that are coming out, they're really going to struggle against Toad. I mean, they're really going to make Toad... No, oh god, I can't even talk. I've been put on tilt with these Xerosic and Jirachi. It's going to have a really good matchup against Toad, because if you play the Marowak, you're just not bothered at all. Even if you just find the Carbink, it means you can hit your energy all game, and Toad's output is not strong enough if they're not getting rid of the energy every turn, so you're just going to overpower them basically, even just by playing 1 Carbink. Its attack is Stone Edge for 2 fighting and a colourless. It's 60 damage, you flip a coin if heads, 30 more damage. I only really talk about this because there may be potential to play a quad Carbink deck, because Carbink itself is so strong and the break is amazing, so this attack isn't even terrible when you consider these could be strong energy. It could be, 3 for 100, which isn't bad with so much acceleration that we have. So I'd be surprised if you see this attacking too often, but it's not out of the question when you have Carbink break in the deck. Onto the other Carbink, I feel like this is going to be the one that is in the higher count in your deck, because it has the ability Safeguard. We know how strong this is. We've seen it on Sigilyph and Suicune in the past. We get this updated, and the most important reason why I think this is even better than in the past is because it's a fighting type Pokemon. So now we can have Focus Sash and Safeguard, which means the majority of the time people are getting rid of Focus Sash either with Megaphone, which still affects us, or Xerosic. And this is what's so crucial. People can't use Hexmaniac and Xerosic in the same turn, clearly because they're both supporters. But if it's an EX deck, they have to Hexmaniac us they have to Xerosic the Sash first and then Hexmaniac to kill us, or they Hexmaniac once, Hexmaniac twice to kill a Carbink. So EX decks have to basically get over the Safeguard twice thanks to Focus Sash, and that's a really, really powerful prospect, giving Carbink a lot of time to stay alive, which means Carbink break is going to get a lot of value. So a very, very good Carbink here. Combining with Focus Sash is just absolutely bonkers in my opinion. It also has the attack, I guess we may as well mention it, 1 fighting, 1 colourless for 40 damage. Again, it can be buffed with things like Fighting Stadium and Strong Energy, so even that can be two-shotting things sometimes. As crazy as that sounds, fighting types just gain so much. Like, you could play loads of Regirocks and even make the strong hilarious to think, but yep, you could even attack with the Carbinks. Here is the mighty card himself, Carbink Break. Look at this thing, it's so awesome. 110 HP. It's not too influential because, like I say in the earlier slide, it's most likely going to have Focus Sash attached to it, but this attack is absolutely nuts. For a single fighting energy, we get to do 20 damage and attach 2 energy from the discard pile to one of our fighting Pokemon. Absolutely monstrous. Combining this with Battle Compressor, we're able to put strong energy in the discard pile, and because the card does not specify basic energy, we can use strong energy from the discard pile to attach to our dudes. And there are so many good targets for fighting types. There's Landorus in Expanded, there's Zygarde, there's Primal Groudon, there's Regirock. I profiled Quad Regirock just the other day. I might have to do a new video with him and Carbink. It could be pretty, like a match made in heaven. It could be really awesome. So this break is absolutely phenomenal. The way the deck is going to work, it's most likely in Standard just going to work with Zygarde, and the way it's built at the moment, and in my eyes, it's going to work very similarly to Virizion Genesect of the past. That's an archetype that was around for 2 years and was pretty much at the top of the format for the majority of the time. And Carbink Break, because of this safeguard, because of Focus Sash, we can get multiple diamond gifts off. One of the biggest problems for Virizion was when it would only get one Emerald Break off. Not Emerald Break, Emerald Slash. So here we're more likely to get multiple diamond gifts off. Also because it's just one attachment and a non-EX, we can just go into a second Carbink Break and guarantee that second diamond gift attack. So we're often getting ridiculous value from Carbink. Often setting up multiple Zygarde for certain. Again, we can have Focus Sash on Zygarde, so even if they're going to Lysandre him up, they have to 2-hit through him, or they have to have already used a Megaphone, stuff like that. Just really, really powerful, and we'll get onto Zygarde later, but all of his attacks are phenomenal, and there's also effectively a new G-Booster in town, so Carbink Break, absolutely phenomenal. Karina Searchable, Battle Compressor Engine, spamming strong energies is just, all these things tick so many boxes. I think the deck is going to be the top of tier 1 as soon as we see this set break, pretty much. Let's talk about Zygarde. Basically, because there's so much support for Zygarde, this card can never be bad. He's always going to be at least decent. Carbink Break, probably the biggest pair with him, but you can even just play like a quad Zygarde and have loads of max elixirs and just use manual attachments to set him up as quickly as possible. Use loads of Regirocks to increase even his lower attacks output. So all of these attacks, you think, okay, one fighting for 20, who really cares? But let's actually read the attack. It can do an additional 20 if there's a stadium in play. So that's a 40 base. That's 60 base with a fighting stadium. If it's a strong energy, it's 80 base. If it's Fury Belt, it's 90 base. 4 more Regirocks on top of that. You're doing 130 for 1 energy. So already that's bonkers. And then think about 1 elixir attachment. You can do the 60 base and all those additions. And you also get to heal from yourself. By the way, we have 190 HP, so with that heal, we almost become like a Mega Evolution in terms of when people are trying to 2-hit into us, it has to be a 2-hit that can not only go over 190 HP, but we get that additional heal involved. And Land's Wrath, just 3 for 100 seems very vanilla. It's identical to Lucario EX's Somersault Kick. But we never really used Lucario EX's second attack because it was always too slow. Now that we have Carbink and we have Max Elixir, this is actually an attack we might be using often. And with all these additions, Strong Energies, Fighting Stadiums, Regirocks, even Land's Wrath can get one-hit KOs on the EX Pokemon. And that's pretty bonkers. On top of that, if we need to do any more damage, there's always this card. The new item card called Power Memory. This can be attached to anything, but if it's attached to Zygarde, you can also use this as your attack. All cells burn, 200 damage, and discard 3 energy attached to this Pokemon. So, without question, Zygarde can one-hit KO pretty much anything in the format. Although it's 200, again, damage increases. Fighting Stadium, Strong Energy, Regirock. We can kill like Whale Lords for fun with Power Memory. Really, really insanely powerful card. Even from the first energy attachment, turn 1 you can put, over 100 counters on the board for 1 energy, and then when you consider this can get ridiculous late game, it honestly is just bonkers. Power Memory is just insane, and this is why it's going to act like a Virizion Genesect deck, because Carbink is so nice in the early game, the slow and steady Safeguard with Focus Sash while you build up 1 or 2 Zygardes, and when these come out they really do put ridiculous counters on the board. The majority of the time they're taking 1-hit KOs on pretty much everything out there. Because we're a fighting deck, we have Focus Sash to keep up against non-EX based decks, so I think this is just a really, really phenomenal archetype. I can't say enough about the deck, really. The only thing that is sort of going against it is that it's quite vanilla. You're just trying to build up big attackers and hit the face, so it might be outcrafted by stuff like Alakazam, which can place its counters carefully, get around Focus Sash quite well, and win that matchup fairly comfortably. So I don't think it's got amazing matchups. It can lose just because of its speed, although it's not the slowest itself. You can play a speed build as well, so it's not necessarily the case, but like I say, it's a sort of build up big, hit the face, and sometimes it can just be outdone by more clever decks that have slightly more convoluted setups, but they can overall get the job done a little bit better. But let's not rain on the parade of Zygarde. He hits really hard and has so much support. This guy is one to definitely pick up. Next up we have the Dark types, Umbreon EX. It has 2 attacks. The first one is Night Veil. For a single colourless energy, we do 20 damage and discard any number of cards from the hand, and then draw an equal number of cards from the deck. Really, I don't think you're going to be using this unless you've got a completely dead hand. You can just get a bit of refreshing in there, get rid of some cards, potentially get rid of Dark Energy, which can be nice for comboing with Baby Yveltal or Dark Patch if you're an expanded. But it's this second attack which has got people talking. It's called Endgame. For a Dark and 2 colourless, we do 70 damage, so it's the same as all the evolutions that we're seeing. But if this knocks out a Mega Evolution, take 2 additional prize cards. So if Umbreon EX kills a Mega Evolution, we are taking 4 prizes for that 1 knockout. That pretty much is amazing. You get double. Just so many prize cards. But let's not get carried away here. Let's just think of what Mega Evolutions are played. First of all, these decks are already fringe. With Zygarde being so good, I think it's going to be very difficult for Mega Manectric to survive. However, Sceptile may have a chance because he hits for weakness, and like we can use Poison, and Theta Stop's good against Greninja, so Sceptile could be staying around, could be a new contender in the format. But the biggest thing about Sceptile is he hits and heals, so as soon as people see an Umbreon, they're never going to stay in range of 70 HP. They're just going to, avoid it. So Umbreon doesn't do anything against Sceptile. Against Mega Rayquaza, again, such a high HP, and just the fact that you just Emerald Break through everything. You have the speed to Lysander this thing up early anyway. I don't see it ever getting the value that you want out of this card. Even if people are playing Mega Manectric, they play Max Potion Shenanigans, and they play Rough Seas. So again, very, very difficult for Umbreon to get in range to really make a use out of this card. I guess if you're using something like Y Cyclone on Yveltal, moving the DC over, that can sometimes set up the knockouts, but I still don't think it's worth putting a slot in the deck because already these decks are going to be niche. Potentially Sceptile being a main deck, these two being very niche decks, although Rayquaza with the resistance might be able to compete with Zygarde, but it would really struggle against multiple Carbinks, so there is that issue. So Sceptile probably the only thing that can deal with the only Mega that we're going to continually see play. Really plays around Umbreon really nicely anyway, and already has a decent Yveltal matchup as long as you can flip fairly okay. So I don't see people making the space for Umbreon EX, even though it can, it will win you games, but when you actually go down to, setting up the board, seeing what you're actually playing against these sorts of decks and which ones will play into this attack, it's pretty much none of them. So Umbreon, unfortunately, I don't think this is one to pick up, although it does look beautiful. Onto Tyranitar, one of the most crazy fun cards I've seen in a while. This has really got the creative juices flowing. The ability is called Roar of Anger. You may use this ability when you play this card from your hand to evolve. Attach as many dark energy from your discard pile to this Pokemon for every prize your opponent has taken. Okay, so if we have lost 5 prizes, we get to attach 5 dark energy onto Tyranitar. And ironically enough, that's his attack cost. So the attack cost is pretty huge. 5 dark energy, Dark Mountain. I'm expecting something phenomenal. And it's only 150 damage. So I think for such a colossal attack cost, this could at least be 180. Like, I'm really sad that this is such a creative card, and I'd go out of my way to try and make this deck good if the attack could actually do something. Like, guarantee me an EX KO and I consider this deck. But because we can't guarantee a one-hit KO, why would anyone go through all the effort to build a crazy Stage 2 deck? They know how bad Stage 2s currently are in the format, so at least tempt us to play such a disadvantage of a deck by playing a Stage 2 in the first place. But no, 150 damage. There is the text that you can discard the top, or you're forced to discard the top 2 cards of your deck. So again, that's already a disincentive to use this attack. So already, we're not guaranteed to one-hit KO stuff, and we have to discard cards from our deck. Important resources. If there's a supporter card in those top 2, we do 50 more. So we only one-hit KO stuff if we discard a supporter card from the top of our deck. So there'll be times when you miss it and you're very sad. There'll be times when you get rid of important resources, like rare candies, Tyranitars, other things like that. Can be really awkward for you, but let's think about how we can at least get this attack going. 5 dark energy. So the Roar of Anger, only really good when there's 1 prize left? Well, not strictly true, because we can actually use Milotic. This is the Flash Fire Milotic with Energy Grace. Once during a turn, you may knock out this Pokemon, and if you do, attach 3 basic energy from your discard pile to one of your Pokemon, excluding EX. So, on turn 2, if we Rare Candy into T-Tar, set up a Milotic, knock it out, and if we have 4 energy in our discard pile, we get 3 from the Energy Grace. When we evolve into T-Tar, we get that 4th energy. We can attach a 5th for the turn, and we can actually use Dark Mountain on turn 2. But is that ever really going to happen? Definitely not. That's a Stage 2, a Stage 1, and 4 energy in the discard pile with 1 in your hand. So precise, so specific that it will almost never happen. However, if you're going to build this deck, this is the only way to play it. I think you play a 4-4 Milotic count with 3 of these ones, probably 1 Ripples or a 2-2 count. Ripples can get back important things that you discard. You can play stuff like Ace Trainer on the second turn of the game, so you kill yourself with Milotic to set up this T-Tar. Ace Trainer, so your opponent hopefully dead draws. You take a KO that turn, and sometimes that can win you a game. Like, sometimes, yes, that's an incredible board state. Turn 2, 160 HP non-EX that's swinging to potentially one-hit KO, and they have only 3 cards in hand from the Ace Trainer. That does sound phenomenal, but if they can respond, you're really sad because you've probably lost the game at that point. And even then, when is that ever going to happen on turn 2? Like, once in maybe 20 games? So, T-Tar, hilariously cool card. Why did they not make Dark Mountain a better attack? It's such a niche Pokemon anyway. Like, we're doing such a convoluted strategy just to get this guy going. Can't you at least reward us with some sort of incentive? Dark Mountain is a horrible attack. Do bear in mind, however, that in Expanded, you can use the same thing, Energy Grace into T-Tar, and then you can use Scramble Switch. So maybe we'll see some fun deck there. I'm sure that's going to be one I somehow try to profile. Like a really turbo Yveltal EX, where I go down a prize, put them all onto T-Tar, scramble into a Yveltal, and just laugh at the opponent until they drop to Den. Sad times for Tyranitar. So, let's look at the metal types. We have Bronze on Break, and it's got a pretty interesting attack. We go up to 130 HP, which is actually on the low side as an effective Stage 2 Pokemon, which is kind of sad. But we do have the attack Gold Rain. For a metal colorless, we discard as many metal energy attached to this Pokemon as we like, then choose a number of your opponent's Pokemon equal to the number of energy we discard, and we are able to target the same Pokemon. So if we have 4 energy attached, we can target Shaymin multiple times. So we do 30 damage for each of those Pokemon for each time you choose an energy. So yeah, say we have 4 energy on our Bronzong, we can go, okay, I want to snipe Shaymin 4 times. 30, 30, 30, 30, get the KO. And that's probably the best way we can utilize Bronzong. And I did just say 4 energy, so think about Bronzong box decks. They can get 4 energy on Pokemon quite easily. However, why would you ever want it to be all on one Bronzong just to kill a Shaymin EX? Sure, you don't have to use a Lysander, but you're threatening, like, you're sacrificing your own Bronzong in the process. You're doing this really niche thing. I think it does have some application for dealing with Night March, because again, 3 or 4 energy on this guy, you can kill Joltix and Pumpkaboos all at once, deal with their board like all at once. Kind of cool, kind of sweeping up everything at once, but even then, like, the Bronzong deck isn't that strong right now, because people can just hex around you, and you really have to think, if I've got 4 energy on a Bronzong break, I could pretty much have 4 energy on any other good metal type EX and do the same thing I'm doing with a break, so it's not really worth me putting the spaces in for this card. Although there is one criticism of the metal deck this whole time that's been very similar to what I was saying about Zygarde, where you just punch the face with your different attackers every time. This at least lets you target the bench, clean up KOs if you've been 2-hitting things. So I personally don't see it, but I'm not going to judge people if people play a one-of. It doesn't really clog up the deck too much. And the buff of HP can keep you out of range of certain things, I guess. But really, I don't think it's that worth it. Bronzong itself isn't too strong right now, and I don't see this buffing it enough to make it, once again, a top tier deck. So, sorry Bronzong break. On to another really interesting metal type. I think this is one of the coolest rogues I think I've ever seen. I'm even more hyped about this than the Reuniclus. We saw the crazy damage Reuniclus could do for 1 energy. But look at this chart, and just, my goodness. So he has 2 attacks. Let's actually tell you what he does first. 110 HP, stage 1 is pretty decent. Metal type is good. Vacuum Wave for a metal does 50, not affected by anything. That's kind of okay. And for a metal colorless, we do Fight Alone, 30 damage. Plus, if you have less Pokemon in play than your opponent, this does 60 more damage times the difference in the number of Pokemon you and your opponent have. So, let's assume you both have an active Pokemon, because you have to in Pokemon. So really, it's a difference in bench. That's what this is saying, basically. So, if the difference in bench Pokemon is 1, for example, if we have 2 Pokemon on our bench, our opponent has 3 Pokemon on the bench, Fight Alone will do a total of 90. That's 60 plus the 30. If there's a disparity of 2, a difference of 2, 150 damage. If there's a difference of 3, we're already hitting 210 damage, enough to KO most Mega EX Pokemon that we see in the format. So, for a disparity of 3, that's really easy to do. Like, all we need to do is, play 1 of our bench Pokemon, and the opponent has 4, or we can have 2, the opponent can have 5. Even if we use Skyfield and use Target Whistle on the opponent, then they can sometimes have 6, 7, 8, and just then it gets absolutely bonkers. It's going to be, never do you ever need to have 8 Pokemon difference in bench. That's you having 0, the opponent having 8. No one ever has had to hit that much damage, so it's really, we're looking at this sort of range. The 5, 4, 3, and 2, I guess. These are the sort of ranges that actually become very interesting, and the ones that we'll be seeing most of for Lucario. Like I say, spamming Target Whistle is going to be a great option for this deck. Most of the time, your opponent's going to see this Lucario and be like, okay, I can't play down too many cards here. Let's just use the ones I need to. Bear in mind, already, that is a really good thing. It's like what we've seen with Zoroark, having the Mind Jack attack. This is like the Mind Jack attack on absolute steroids, because it's 60 damage every time your opponent puts down a new bench Pokemon. Absolutely nutty, so the majority of decks need to put down things. They need to play Shaymins for the cards. They need to play, evolution decks. Look at Greninja. They always have to get those Frogadiers out. They always have to get Bats out if it's a Bats-based deck. Zygardes, they need to have multiple Zygarde and Carbink out. Alakazam, that plays Skyfield on its own, and it has to play down Hoopers, Alakazams, and Shaymins. So most decks just, they play with a 5 bench. They just need that to get set up. So either your opponent doesn't have a very good setup because we're threatening so much damage, or they play into our damage and really this just gets insane. So we're going to try and be basically just a 4/4 count of Lucario in the deck, have very few bench other Pokemon, maybe a Bronzong because it is a Metal and Colorless, potentially Max Elixir to go onto the Riolus. But it's going to be really tough. Like, although this damage is bonkers, let's not get deluded about this. This is absolutely nuts for a non-EX. This can dish out ridiculous damage sometimes. But there are still decks that are just going to be like, fine, do this big damage. I can still beat you because you have only one Pokemon, one Stage 1 active, and probably 1 to 2 bench Pokemon maximum, really. So if they can beat you, like think of an Alakazam deck, they can just snipe all around the board, kill your benched Riolu, and then kill the active Pokemon and bench you out. Easy for a Greninja to do the same thing. It's really only like other EX decks. Like think about Zygarde Carbink, which only hit the face. You're probably going to have a good matchup against them because you're all non-EX. You can easily reach these numbers, and they really can't do anything about that. They can't do anything about it. What I do like is we can have Focus Sash on our Riolu on the bench because they are fighting types. We pretty much don't need the damage, so we can happily put Sash on there so that we can sort of protect Riolu a bit around Lysander so that we can Max Elixir to it quite comfortably. So that's an interesting inclusion. I think it's definitely a deck that I'm going to toy with, and there'll be a profile soon. We can manipulate our bench by playing down Robo-Subs and then discarding them if we are worried about being benched, and buying us turns basically to get the Lucarios going. We can AZ up cards. If we need to Shaman to draw into stuff, we can AZ it back up. And like I was saying, Target Whistle is probably going to be more than just a 1-of in this deck for sure. Probably a 2 or 3-of to force your opponent to have a high bench, and then even Skyfield to make the disparity just crazy. If you play the Skyfield Whistle build, like 4 Whistle, 3 or 4 Skyfields, then it means you can have a regular setup. You can have 3 of your own bench Pokemon, make the Skyfield come in so that you're still hitting 210 or something like that. So it's going to be interesting how we see Lucario work. Most of the time I think you're going to have 1 to 2 bench Pokemon and hit within this range most of the time, depending on how well your opponent's playing around it and how many times you can hit Whistle off and stuff like that. So Lucario, definitely an intriguing card, and one that we've not seen for a long time, or pretty much ever. I think this is a completely new mechanic, and very intriguing. Powerhouse card once again. I think this can do quite well. On to Genesect. This is a Metal type EX, the first time we've seen him as a Metal type. And he has 180 HP. He has a decent ability and a decent attack. Only ever decent in my opinion. Cassette change. Once during a turn, you may return a tool card attached to this Pokemon to your hand. So the idea is, if you're in a 2-shot war, you can like put Assault Vest on here to make it a bit more tanky, and then when you need to, you can replace this for an increaser of damage, like Muscle Band, to get cheeky KOs around the board. I think it's cute rather than that good. It could be an interesting 1-of in Virizion Genesect and Expanded, because you can put tools on this guy just to pick them back up later. Like you can put G-Booster on him and then pick him up, put it onto something else, or you can use G-Booster once on this guy and then use his ability to put G-Booster back to the hand if he survived a hit, and then you can attach G-Booster to a bench Genesect. So potentially a 1-of just because of his ability in Virgen. Not that Virgen's the biggest deck right now. His attack is Rapid Blaster. It's for 3 Metal Energy. We do 100 plus 20 more for each Metal Energy we discard. So discarding 4 energy is 180. Not bad. Again, it's like I was saying with the Bronzong Break. If you're attaching 4 energy to this guy, it may as well be something on like Aegislash or Dialga or any other thing that can be paired with Bronzong. Look at stuff like Tyrantrum. So I think this card is pretty much outclassed, although you might see him as a niche 1-of in Virgen. Bear in mind though, he does have a 2 retreat cost, so he doesn't quite play perfectly with stuff like Skyro Bridge. So overall I think Genesect is subpar, unfortunately. On to some more subpar EXs. I think we got a few of them all in a row. Here is Altaria. I think it's really weird, this Mega Evolution. There's nothing that makes me just think, yeah, this could be good. Like, it's all very average. DCE for 30. If this card recovered any HP, you do an additional 60 and remove 3 from self. So 90 for DCE. Like, we've seen it on all sorts of things throughout the course. This isn't that good. Healing the 3 is rarely that relevant with only 170 HP. Shining Wind for 3 colorless energy does 80, and we have no weakness. Yeah, that's kind of cool, but 80 is really low damage. You're never going to win games just by doing Shining Wind. And then we look at the Mega. 220 HP is okay, stay out of range of quite a few things, but you really have to compete. As a Fairy Mega Evolution, you have to compete with Mega Gardevoir. Mega Gardevoir is pretty much the bog standard. Like, you have to be better than Mega Gardy to even be considered as a Fairy Mega type. So we have, for a Fairy and 2 colorless, 100 damage, and if this Pokemon has special energy attached, it does an additional 30, and you heal 30 from each of your Pokemon. So 130 for a Fairy colorless is only, again, it's mediocre. We've seen it all before on better cards. Like, we've seen Turbo Bolt do 110 and attach 2 from the discard pile for a Mega Evolution. We've seen Sceptile can attach 2 for 100. This does 130, yes, slightly more damage, but the heal for 30 is just no way as good. Like, it's only really good against stuff like Trevenant or Greninja, I guess, but even Greninja can play around it. The heal isn't good enough. It's just a subpar Mega. If you're going to be playing a Fairy Mega, make it be Mega Gardevoir, because it can actually do things. Mega Altaria is just a pretty sad introduction, really. It doesn't do much at all. Next we have Diancie. I'm slightly more hopeful for Diancie because I always wanted the old Mega Diancie to work. Unfortunately, we did not get a Spirit Link for Diancie, so already, I'm just not very hopeful for this card. 150 HP for an EX Pokemon is absolutely horrendous. Why Pokemon, why? If this has had, like, a normal EX's HP, this card would be decent, but again, it's one of these cards that gets outclassed by, like, the Sylveon EX or just Xerneas EX. So let's have a look at it, I guess. Twinkle Veil, as long as this Pokemon is your active, any damage is reduced by 30. So, as long as the ability is around, we do resist 30, so we are effectively 180 HP. Which again is only mediocre. It's not really going to impress me. It's not that good. The attack is Miracle Stage, 60. If there's a stadium, you do an additional 50 for Fairy double colorless. So it's comparable to Xerneas and Sylveon, but I don't think it outclasses it in any way. So it's, again, one of these things where it just doesn't really fit a purpose. I guess you play this card over the promo Diancie if you're going to try and use the Mega, but this has never been a good card, like never been playable, unfortunately, because Mega Evolution's too painful. It's too easy to play around Diamond Force. So, unfortunately, I think Diancie is another one of these EXs that you're not happy to pull unless you're a collector. On to, again, it's just so annoying that these were all put in a row, but that's just how the set came out. But Kingdra EX is another EX Pokemon that just makes me sad. Like, I really love Kingdra. We've had some amazing Kingdras in the past. This one is a Dragon type, so I thought, oh great, we could have some double Dragon energy synergy and have these really cool attacks that do good things. But no. 170 HP on Kingdra, 2 attacks. The first is for a colorless energy, just 70 and discard a stadium. Not 70, 20. Discard a stadium. Like, it's so weak, so weak. So many things just outclass this early attack. So try and redeem yourself with a good second attack. Already the attack cost is awkward. Water, colorless, colorless, colorless. Okay, it could be DDE and DCE. So it's pretty similar to Giratina. Can it be better than Chaos Wheel? Hell no. Dragon Trail, 60 plus 30 more for each lightning basic energy attached to this Pokemon. So now we can't use double Dragon Energy because it won't help us out at all, other than paying the cost of the water. But it means on top of that we just have to have extra lightning energy. This actually reminds me of Rayquaza EX. I think it does outclass Rayquaza in terms of beating Dragon Burst, because you don't have to discard the energy, for all the lightning energy that you attach. So it does combo with Magnezone and Eels. So you can get him powered up. He is a big hitter, but bear in mind, people can, like, Yveltal's a big deck. Yveltal completely beats this. Anything playing Hex probably beats this. Your Fairy weak, that's not even the best weakness to have. Like, it's just so bog standard. You have to do so much just to get the one-hit KO that I really don't think it's worth it. Potentially better than Ray if you're going to be playing an Eels deck. But again, it brings about its own weaknesses by keeping the energy on him. So pretty sad times for Kingdra. Again, it's one for collectors, I'm afraid. Although the full art does look beautiful. I'd love to pull a full art, but just not anymore. So let's look at Aerodactyl. I earlier talked about Omastar. I probably should have talked about Aerodactyl at the same time, but I'm sure most of you have seen this set already. Aerodactyl is a restored Pokemon, so he's not quite a basic, but if we use Omastar, we can get him instantly onto the bench, which is pretty cool. So technically we can attack with him on turn 1. 120 HP is pretty decent, and his 2 attacks are Bite. For a colourless energy, we do 30, very meh. And then for 2 colourless energy, Jet Draft does 120, and discard a special energy attached to your opponent's active Pokemon. This is a very good attack. A really, really strong attack. Discarding special energy is really good. We've seen how good it is with Promo Jirachi, dealing with stuff like Night March and Seismitoad. I've already said, though, that Night March and Toad are developing to use basic energy, so you're not always getting the discard, which is a bit sad. But even then, like, 120 for DC is quite well costed. We can one-hit KO Shaymin EXs very nicely, and that's what's most important about this card. Because we have Omastar Break, which can Lysant, it has the ability to get Shaymins into the active position. Every turn, we don't have to use a Lysander. We can just use this guy, and then use Jet Draft to kill Shaymin. And then we're going to target Whistle Shaymin, and then we're going to target Whistle Shaymin, and try and win. That's basically the approach I think the deck has. It's going to be basically the way that Gallade Octillery tries to win, by just kill loads of Shaymins. This is the way the Fossil deck will win. Jet Draft with DC just to kill Shaymin. Spamming Target Whistle. We know how good Target Whistle is. It works out for Night March and stuff like that, so I don't see why it can't work in a deck like this, especially because you don't need to use your supporter for the turn. You just need to get the break out, which is, you know, sometimes easier, sometimes more annoying, but pretty decent. Bear in mind, we do have Twist Mountain as well in Expanded, so I think because we have so much more support for the Archie engine in Expanded, like we have Computer Search, we have Jirachi, EX, these things are really going to make the Archie quite regular. Like, we know with Archie's Toys, they can get it very frequently on the first turn, way more frequently than people can in Standard. So with Twist Mountain as well in Expanded, I think it's actually quite easy to get the Fossil build working off of the Archie. So I think it's a deck to try out in Expanded, not really one for Standard. Even though this is decent, I think just we have so much more support for this deck in Expanded that's really only where I see this deck fitting in. So we're chugging through, still on the colourless types. We have Lugia. It's been a while since we've seen Lugia, but it's essentially a Bouffalant that we've seen quite a while ago. So the only slight power creep of this card is that we have plus 20 HP from Bouffalant of old. But his ability is the same as Boofa. Any damage done is reduced by 20, and his attack is the same as Goldbreaker, just with a different name as well. So I didn't bother putting the text in like with the break. I thought I'd just have Bouffalant because it's so much easier. So Lugia's attack is a base of 60. If it's an EX Pokemon, we do 120. Pretty good. Bouffalant in his day was used in a couple of decks. I remember him being a one-of in like Virizion Genesect back in the day, just to skew the prize trade a little bit. I think Lugia can do a similar role in a number of decks. Most notably, he has a resistance to fighting, so he could be a decent card to be annoying for Zygarde. Also, we do have Max Elixir plus DCE, so you can actually get this going on turn 1. So Lugia can be a decent presence in the format. Lightning Weakness is actually okay. If Zygarde's going to be a top deck, then having Lightning Weakness is way better than it has been in the past. So Lugia could potentially be a nice contender to fill the slot that Bouffalant used to. Bouffalant normally was like a one-of in certain decks. That's pretty much the way I see Lugia. I don't see Lugia being like quad Lugia with loads of break evolutions, because unfortunately the break's not that good. 150 HP when you do break evolve is actually pretty tasty. You're effectively a stage 1 Pokemon with 150, so that's really nice and bulky. And his attack for 4 colourless energy is 150 damage, and discard 2 attached to this Pokemon. It's really similar to what I was saying about Tyranitar. Like, yes, you can put a Muscle Band to do 150, but then you're not even killing most EXs. People have Fighting Fury Belt now. Zygarde is way out of range. So this attack really just needed to be more damage. 4 energy is a big commitment. Discarding 2 already. This had to be a higher number. If this was a higher number, even 160 would make me want to play this a lot more, because Lugia's fine. Like, Lugia's okay against EXs. You need this so that you can deal with the non-EXs. If this was 170, you could KO like breaks, like Greninja Break and stuff like that, and actually be competitive. Because this is weighted at 150, it's just so subpar, just so not good enough. Even though like it's a nice buff of HP, it'll come off now and again. It's just not a big enough step up from Lugia's original attack. So I like the Lugia. I can see it being a 1 or 2 of in some decks as this non-EX option that can hate on EX decks. But I don't see the break being played for anything more than a HP buff, unfortunately. So yeah, it's a bit of a shame Lugia break isn't going to be a big feature in the format. It's just a real near miss. I'm so surprised that we've seen 150 so often in the game. I thought eventually we'd see some power creep in terms of this attack damage, but nope, they decided to keep Lugia as a subpar break evolution, I'm afraid. One for the collectors for sure. Next up we have Ordino and Mega Ordino. It's weird, this format, this set has had some real star players like the Carbink, the Zygarde, the Mew, the Alakazam. These are insane, but then the other EX cards really are subpar. This Ordino, again, feels like a subpar card. A couple of cards, I guess. 180 HP is the higher side. Drain Slap, 20, heal 20. Really it is like a situation like, who cares about this damage? Do the Wave for 3 colourless, 60 plus 10 more for each of your benched Pokemon. So with 5 on the bench, your 2 hitting stuff, 110 damage is decent for sure. Not setting the world on fire. Even with Skyfield, we're doing 140. And again, that stays out of range of anything nice, even with stuff like Muscle Band support. So I don't think Do the Wave is, setting the world alight. Also, the biggest thing here, look, fighting weakness. Ordino had to be absolutely monstrously good to see any play, because it has to compete with Zygarde. Even with Lugia's thrown into the deck, I feel like you lose against Zygarde. So this Ordino had to be monstrous to be good at all. And so far, these sorts of attacks aren't really doing it for me. Looking at the Mega Ordino, 220 HP again, it's slightly higher than 210, and that's kind of like average-ish, so it's not the worst HP in the world. Again, for 3 colourless energy, this is actually quite decent. DC plus Mega Turbo is quite easy to achieve, especially with Toad being less and less of a thing. You can play that Carbink to stop your basic energy going, at least, so it's quite easy to keep the energy on now, so it's actually not the worst energy cost. 110, again, it's this middle of the line, 2-shotting, sort of mediocrity. If you played a supporter card from your hand this turn, you do an additional 50 to one of your opponent's benched Pokemon. So that's good. A 50 snipe is nice. I think this card, again, it's one of these things where if the numbers were slightly different, if this was a 60 snipe, it'd be so relevant, because then you'd be 2-shotting Shaymin EXs. But clearly they just didn't want this card to be good. If this was 60, it's a really good card as a snipe. It's kind of a power creep of Darkrai, right? This is a Mega Evolution, of course, so it's a turn slower and what have you. Darkrai was awesome because of his ability, but at least attack-wise, Magical Symphony is just an upgraded Night Spear. 20 more base damage and 20 more snipe damage, so at least in that regard, Ordino looks promising, but why is this snipe not 60? With a 60 snipe, people would consider this Ordino, even with the weakness. Now, I just think everyone thinks, oh, this Ordino is pretty terrible. So, bit of a shame. Would have liked to have seen this as a potential contender. We haven't seen many good snipers for a while, other than like from abilities that we're seeing from Alakazam and Greninja. And that's a bit of a shame. So, sorry Ordino, again, you just don't fit the bill, unfortunately. Especially with that weakness. Very unfortunate. So that's it for Pokemon. There's really only a few star players Pokemon-wise. I felt like I was moaning more than anything else in this set review, but oops, I've gone too far. I felt like I've moaned quite a bit, but I am still very enthusiastic about the ones that I do think are good. But let's look at some of these trainers. First of all, the Spirit Links. All the Megas, they get Spirit Links. I think we were all aware of that, but just good to mention. Next up, we have Bent Spoon. Prevent all effects of attacks except damage done to the Pokemon this card is attached to. Effects already on this Pokemon are not removed. So this is a tool card, and it basically has the same effect that Wonder Energy has. And Wonder Energy was literally never played in Fairy decks. So in a slot that's more competitive, basically there are so many good tools out there right now. Why on earth would you play Bent Spoon over Fury Belt, Muscle Band, Focus Sash, even stuff like Hard Charm or Assault Vest? Mega decks, they need to have the Spirit Links, so it's such a competitive slot that Bent Spoon, I think, will literally never be played. On to the interesting stadium set. It's similar to Parallel City, where you have the two effects going on depending on which way you face it. And it's called Chaos Tower. And if this side is facing you, your Pokemon can't be asleep or paralyzed. And if those Pokemon already are paralyzed or asleep, you get to remove the condition. And then the other side is can't be confused or poisoned. And once again, if you are already confused or poisoned, you remove those conditions. So some good special condition hate is kind of necessary. Looking at expanded, Laser Verbank is very big. So having something like Chaos Town to remove poison is pretty cool. Removing paralysis may be a bigger deal now that Servine could potentially be teched in, or just a deck on its own. So kind of potential, but again, it's one of these things where the stadium slot, again, it's very competitive. There's very few decks that get to choose its stadium. Zygarde is almost always playing Fighting Stadium. Night March is playing D-Valley. Manectric playing Rough Seas. All these decks have already pretty much got predetermined stadiums that are pretty much way stronger than Chaos Tower. So I feel like if status conditions are becoming too big of a deal, people will just play Pokemon Center Lady because it's a VS Secretable Search card to get out of status. It's kind of annoying to spend the supporter for the turn, but hey, it's better than having Chaos Tower, especially when you sort of need to have other stadiums most of the time. It's comparable to Steel Shelter. Steel Shelter was rarely played in high counts, even in metal decks. So yeah, I don't see this card being too good, especially because like I would have liked it if it was asleep or poisoned in the same one, because then you're actually hard countering laser. Now, even if you are hit with a laser flip, you have the decision: should I wake up this turn and still be poisoned, or should I just poison and hope? Like, at least Chaos Tower could have been a counter to Hypnotoxic Laser and expanded, but no, we don't even get that. Sad times, Chaos Tower, sad times. De-Evolution Spray gets the reprint back from Dragons Exalted. That's the new artwork, but it reads exactly the same. Devolve one of your evolved Pokemon and put the highest stage into your hand. So there's a few good Pokemon that we would like to spam with this. Serperior has the Servine, which is amazing. Going into the Mega Alakazam and respamming Kinesis is pretty cool. Respamming Bats is also pretty cool. I think De-Evolution Spray, in terms of deck space, has to compete with Super Scoop Up. And so far, the decks that I've been building, I've already profiled Serperior and Alakazam, and I felt that Super Scoop Up, because of its extra versatility, picking up stuff like Shaman, healing your guys, whereas De-Evolution Spray can't heal. Like, if you already have 160 HP on your Mega Alakazam, you can't use Devo Spray because you die. Same for Serperior. If you tank a hit that's, 80 HP or something like that, you can't Devo Spray because you die. So Super Scoop Up is always playable, even though it's a coin flip. And I think overall it will outclass Devo Spray. But if it's a deck that's super focused like these decks are, Devo Spray might feature as a 1 or 2 of, just to give you those extra spams. So yeah, pretty decent card. It could also be really good with Forretress. Forretress Donk has been a deck that people played in Japan when we had Lysander's Trump card to just keep recycling. So we do have 4 Super Scoop Up, 4 Devo Spray, AZ, Cassius, cards like this. Of course, Forest of Giant Plants, so Devo Spray could potentially be used in Fortress-based decks, so that's something to look out for. Could be pretty fun. Onto the fossil stuff. All three fossils share the same text. Look at the bottom 7 cards of your deck. You may reveal, the fossil Pokemon. This is clearly copied from the old Amber. And you put it onto your bench and shuffle the other cards back into your deck. I mean, this engine is just not very strong. First of all, it's an item. There's a chance that you don't even hit your Pokemon. It's just really a bad deal that fossils have got. We do have Fossil Excavation Kit. Search your deck for up to 2 Old Amber, Helix, or Dome fossils. Put them into your hand. Because these aren't even guaranteed, I think even this card is bad. So these are so many slots in the deck. Like, you have to play, probably 4 Helix, 4 Old Amber, 3 or 4 Fossil Excavation Kits to get real value from this. And even then, like, how do you sort out your top decks? Use like maintenance to put back the fossil Pokemon in your hand and shuffle the deck to increase your odds. I think it's just really convoluted. We have the Archie for Omastar. I think that's the only way I can see fossils working at the moment. Again, in Expanded we have Twist Mountain, so I think you never play these cards, to be honest. Fossils have really got a bad deal at the moment, and it's sad because fossils are quite popular Pokemon, especially the older ones. Energy Pouch is another new tool card. If the Pokemon this tool is attached to is knocked out by damage from the opponent's attacks, return all basic energy attached to that Pokemon from your discard pile to your hand. So think of like Archistoise, where you put 8 or 9 energy onto a Keldeo sometimes and just swing for monstrous damage. Well, if you have Energy Pouch attached, you can put all those energy back into the hand. When Keldeo dies, you send up a new Pokemon, slap those 9 energy onto a new Keldeo, and you're laughing, basically. That's pretty much the best case scenario, but are we ever actually going to play this? Again, Energy Pouch has to compete in one of the most competitive slots we have in Pokemon right now, like Focus Sash, Fury Belt. All of these cards are so competitive that I already am scared for Energy Pouch. Of course, in Expanded, we have Superior Energy Retrieval, that probably outclasses Energy Pouch as well, because it still allows us to play Floatstone or whatever else for our Keldeo decks. But in Standard right now, we have Magnezone, and we don't have Superior, so this is like our Superior Energy Retrieval option if we're going to play a Magnezone deck. At the moment, the targets for Magnezone are either Kingdra or Raikou. I guess Pikachu, but Pikachu discards the energy, so this tool is pretty useless. So attaching it to a bunch to Raikou so you can eventually get one-hit KOs is kind of interesting. A small buff for Raikou Magnezone, but the deck is miles away from being competitive because it is a Stage 2, and it's ability focused, and so many other reasons why this is bad. And Lightning typing is so bad right now with Zygarde becoming a top tier deck, so unfortunately I think Energy Pouch is one that stays in the binder for now, but it does have potential for sure. At the moment it's outclassed and expanded with Superior, especially because people can use Execute to pay the cost for free, and just being a tool card has to compete with so many other good tools. Energy Reset is a pretty interesting card. I thought this card was a troll when I first saw it. Return any number of energy cards attached to your Pokemon in play to your hand. And I really sat there and read this card and thought, well, when do I ever want to do this? Well, maybe if you've been Royal Flash 10 times and all your energy's stuck on a Shaymin EX and you can pick them all back up, but I think you never ever want to return energy to the hand. One of the biggest things about the Pokemon trading card game is you're limited to 1 manual attachment per turn. So many decks have come around because you have Acceleration. We have Max Elixir, we have Bronzong, Electric, Magnezone. All of these cards try and cheat energy cost, right? They try and get additional attachments. Carbink, clearly the best example. Mega Manectric, all these cards, they become decks because they can cheat the extra attachment per turn. So why on earth would you play a card to reset your attachments? You just lose so many turns of value that I really don't ever see this card seeing play. Maybe I'm missing something. Is there some sort of niche attack where this could be amazing? I really don't think so. Maybe you've been trolled by Slowking, but you're not going to play a card because Slowking's rarely played at all anyway, so this card I think is pretty junk. It goes against some of the principles of Pokemon as well, in terms of one attachment per turn is a limit, and why would you ever want to go backwards, really, in terms of your own board state? Fairy Drop is again, it feels like it's an unnecessary card that got printed. Remove 5 counters from one of your Pokemon that has Fairy energy attached to it. One of the biggest reasons that the Fairy archetype is an archetype is because we can use Fairy Transfer and Max Potion. This just completely outclasses Fairy Drop. Healing 5 counters is not relevant enough at all. Like, Super Potion is only ever played in, the most niche of decks in very certain circumstances. Potion is never played. Freshwater Set is never played. This is comparable, and it's comparably awful because Max Potion with Aromatisse is the way that you would play it. This is limited to Fairy Pokemon as well, so this is complete junk in my opinion. I just don't understand why this card was printed, just to fill space. I hate to say that, but I feel like it is. Lass's Recommendation is an interesting supporter card. It allows you to draw equal to the number of your opponent's benched basic Pokemon. So we have to compare this kind of with 2 of these supporters. Tieno is a constant 3, like a guaranteed 3 cards. So Lass's Recommendation, if you're up against an all-basic Pokemon deck, it can get you more. It's like a Colrus, but instead of shuffle draw, you're just getting additional draws into the hand. So it's not terrible. It can be more than Tieno, but it struggles the same way that Colrus struggles in the early turns. Or if you've gone first, this card will draw you 1 or 0 or no cards. So the Tieno is a stable 3, and I think overall you want a stable 3 over Lass's Recommendation, which is unstable. Colrus is only so good because it is monstrous when it's late game. Even if you're drawing like 5 cards off of this, you're not that happy. Like, it's not that good. And if you're up against evolution decks, like, you're never going to get value from this. It's always probably going to be below 2 cards, or even just as good as Tieno. So, too situational. It's horrible in the early turns. Tieno's better, and Tieno never sees play. So, that'll tell you what I think about this card. On to Mega Catcher. Mega Catcher switches one of your opponent's benched Megas with his or her active Pokemon. Okay. Some random Mega Evolution hate for completely no reason. If you're playing a Mega Evolution deck, they're normally in the active position attacking because they're good. So I never see Mega Catcher really paying off because they're already in the active. It's so situational, and Mega decks, like I was saying with the Umbreon earlier on, there's not many Mega decks going to be running around. Rayquaza maybe will survive. Sceptile will probably be strong, to be honest. Manectric will probably not survive in recent times just because of the strength of Zygarde. But these things are going to be in the active position. And, even then, they're going to be a small percentage of the meta. You don't want to play one card that's dead in, 9 out of 10 of your matchups. So, Mega Catcher never gets played. Team Rocket's Handiwork is an interesting supporter card that could be used again for the mill approach of all these decks. Flip 2 coins. For each head, discard 2 cards from the top of your opponent's deck. I think this is too slow for the Durants and the Weezings because most of the time you're normally using other supporters to keep your setup sustained. However, I think this is an absolutely insane one-of in Sableye Garbodor in Expanded. When you're in that Puzzle of Time loop and your opponent has no hand, this is the supporter that you go to every turn when you have nothing else to do. This and Delinquent are the cards that just seal games for you. You don't really even care about these flips. Just one head gets 2. That's absolutely fine. Like, normally you're puzzling back just for one Trick Shovel, and now if you've already locked down the board state, you can just puzzle back one of these. You only need to play one of these in the deck, and you're completely satisfied. This just made Sableye even more tier 1, even more speedy as well. Like, there'd be questions of time, whether Sableye could win in enough time. So if you're really pressed for time as the Sableye player, this just completely speeds up the whole process. So it's a great addition to Sableye Garbodor. I don't know why they printed this card. It just makes me sad that Sableye Garb gets even better. Whoops. And finally we have the reprints. So these are all reprints that are already in the set. Already in format. So Fan Club, pretty cool. Scorched Earth, Fairy Gun, Shauna, Ultra Ball. Straw Energy gets a reprint, which is worth mentioning because it means that they intend to keep Zygarde pretty strong for the remainder of its life, pretty much. So yeah, some nice reprints for people trying to get into the game. The set has only a few very good cards, but in terms of picking up packs and trying to get cards to play the game, you get some nice staples here. I mean, Shauna and Fan Club aren't played too much, but Ultra Ball, DC, and Strong Energy are really worth picking up, in my opinion. And then there's two more reprints that are returning to the format from, at the moment they're stuck in an expanded, but now they're back in standard as well. Random Receiver, reveal the top card of your deck until you reveal a supporter, and then put that into your hand. So this is a pretty cool card for turbo decks. I remember back in the day, really old school Night March only ever played 3 or 4 Juniper and just played 3 or 4 Random Receiver, because this was when we had Catcher that was actually pretty much the same as Lysander. Nowadays, I don't think Random Receiver's ever going to see play, because there's so many one-off supporters that we combo with VS Seeker that the format's just not right for a deck like this, where you could reveal a Lysander, you could reveal a Xerosic, you could reveal, any one of these cards that is really situational when you're digging for a draw card and you're just pretty sad. So Random Receiver I don't think sees play. However, this guy, N, he's back. Don't know how many people think about this. I think I'm very happy to see this card because it means I don't have to play Birch or Shauna anymore. So we actually get to play a good supporter again, which is awesome. But I think I need to dedicate a whole video to N, because for players who've never played with N before, this is, a format defining card. There's so many reasons why this card is absolutely monstrously good. So talking about N is for another time. Just know that he's back, and it's pretty awesome. Each player shuffles his or her hand into his or her deck and then draws the same number of cards for their remaining prize cards. Yeah, very good supporter. Great early game, phenomenal late game. N is back, and he's really going to be a format-defining card, as he always has been. So, yeah, very good card. Even now, even better than when he used to be. He used to be a 4-of. Now N, even as a 1-of in decks, just for a VS Seeker target, even then he's affecting games, a lot of the time. So, N is back, and it's pretty cool. So, thanks everyone. It's been a long video, I imagine. So yeah, I've discussed everything. If you argue with anything, if I missed out a card that you thought was really good, let me know in the comment section below. Let me know your favourite cards. I'm going to be doing a top 10 list. It's going to be much more concise, and that should be worth a watch as well. But I imagine if you stay to the end, thanks for watching and listening to me ramble on. I wonder what your favourite cards are, the best combos that you can see. Maybe I missed stuff, so let me know in the comments below. It's been Joe from OmniPoke, and I need to go drink a lot of water because my voice is absolutely dying. So, cheers guys, and I will see you guys next time.